Welcome back to my channel. Hope you guys are looking forward to some more videos from me. And I thought of this as an idea where I was questioning just how powerful is the adult forms of Ichigo and Naruto. Now Naruto is a bit of a different case. We actually have some feats going off of, But generally in anime, the adults or the prodigies usually are the prodigies are usually the kids, right? And we're going through the story of people growing up over time, but usually the main character isn't an adult. And they usually overshadow the adults throughout the whole thing. But what's funny is, especially in the case of Ichigo, where we don't get to see him fight, a lot of these people grow up into adulthood. But we don't generally, that's the end. That's the actual end of the series for many different anime. I was thinking, well, just how powerful are they? Now, again, as I said with Naruto, it's a bit different because he has feats, but that still doesn't actually, quantify necessarily so just how much power, how much more powerful did he get, or weaker is he? Anything can happen with a time passage. And so what this video is covering is a hypothetical, just for fun, easy video, and it's asking the question, what if Naruto and Ichigo, and I do want to do this with some other people, but for now, Naruto and Ichigo, what if, as adults, they were stronger than their main series selves at full power? Not stronger, I suppose, equal to, but in base. What if adult Ichigo, in base, is as powerful as true Bankai, normal series Ichigo's self was? And what if base power adult Naruto was as strong as, Sage of Six Paths mode, Avatar, whatever have you, Naruto, when he was facing Kaguya and such, right? And if so, if the time passage did allow for such power increases, where would their actual top-end power be then? What would it be like for adult Ichigo or adult Naruto using their actual full power? Now we got to see, for example, with Naruto Baryon form, but feats-wise, it's pretty lackluster. But again, this is going with the hypothetical. With Ichigo, however, we don't have any feats, right? So this is purely hypothetical. That's the premise. Let's have fun with this. Now, I will start with Naruto. And thing to be made clear is that his Sage mode is definitely at minimum that 10 times increase over the cursed form, which are said to have the 10 times themselves. Now, to be fair, just like the Sound 4 or anybody else using the cursed forms, it's blatantly shown that the cursed forms don't increase every stat by 10 times. It's not 10 times to your power and speed and durability and reaction, They are different. Many of the forms are different, but for the case of this, I will be treating it as if it's just 10 times going to go towards AP, just because that's going to be what I care about calcing in this case, or scaling rather. So that's going to be 10 times minimum for the Sage mode. Now, an interesting thing is that the 8 Tails, when he fought Pain, 8 Tails was outright stronger than his Chibaku Tensei, which is superior to his Rasen Shuriken, which is already superior to the base durability of Sage mode Naruto, who could only use 2 Rasen Shurikens before being completely, out of Sage mode, essentially. Now, the reason that matters is because KCM 1 is greater than Sage mode, but not by the highest degree except for speed. Speed was remarkably different in terms of how he responded to the opponents of different levels. However, even if I say that KCM 1 is, say, 11 times base Naruto, with most of it being put into speed, based on Sage mode being at 10 times, KCM 2 is where we can comfortably lowball it to 15 times his base. But then we get something as much as KCM 2 plus his Sage mode. And here's where I want to make this clear. The Sage mode amp shows to be either extremely diluted or additive at best, where I'm putting it at a minimum of the 25 times base at best. Now, this is because if it was multiplicative, the feats that he shows go completely against it. The people he faces and all of their feats, all scaling and all feats, have it being additive at best. Okay? And so from there, I'll be taking it as additive. As such, that means KCM2 plus Sage Mode is going to be as much as 25 times base. Now, here, I'll even grant that 6-Path Sage Mode is 10 times higher than when he was in KCM2 plus Sage Mode, coming out to about a 250 times base, okay? I'm assuming that this is an actual 10 times multiplier, no longer additive. This is simply because he truly does ascend far, far above, approximately a whole magnitude's worth in his feats above what he was able to show prior. And so a whole magnitude's worth is about 10 times, and it makes sense. It fits within it, that his 6-Path Sage Mode is as much of an amp to his KCM2 and Sage Mode, but like self, as Sage Mode was to his base. You know, quite the difference, right? And from there, this is completely made up, but I will then take Baryon Mode to be a minimum of 10 times his 6-Path Sage Mode. Now 6-Path Sage Mode you can actually quantify a bit with his feats being that minimum of 10 times. But Baryon Mode, I mean, 10 times even of a 6-Path Sage Mode, that's kind of overhyped based on feats, because besides the speed that he showed against Ichigo, like, he wasn't hurting Ichigo, right, with his attacks. We don't see any real AP increase in speed. Like, it was just simply that the aging hacks countered him, and he was faster. That was about it. But, hey, let's just say that it's 10 times. A lot of this is hypothetical anyways. Now, if it's 10 times, again, multiplicative, then that comes out to saying, okay, then he's coming out to 2,500 times his base. And if we're assuming that adult Naruto could easily be, in base, as strong as his teen self, then based on the scaling that we've seen from, you know, War Arc Naruto at full power, that means that adult Naruto, in Baryon Mode, should be coming out to about this many joules per centimeter cubed, or about at the mid-end of multi-continental joules per centimeter cubed. Which is, anybody who's seen my series, my channel, knows is a far cry above where I have him, based on any possible logic behind feats and scaling. Mid-end multi-continental joules per centimeter cubed. Note that again, I'm talking about joules, not just total, but per centimeter cubed. That is very, very impressive. Now, if that's not enough, you're saying, I don't know, it sounds like you're lowballing the numbers. Don't worry, I did what I labeled, from how I'm labeling it, the overhyped scaling. So, I'll keep the bases of these multipliers that I said, such as Sage Mode being 10 times, because that's just too guaranteed of a minimum. We want that to be accurate. But what I mean by overhyping is taking a much more favorable approach on some of these multipliers that aren't actually known. So, for example, let's say that 6-Path Sage Mode, 10 times his KCM2 plus Sage Mode, what if it was 100 times? That could fit within quite a few people's models. And if that's the case, then just his 6-Path Sage Mode is already as strong as I had the Baryon Mode, coming in at that same amount of joules per centimeter cubed, or, as you can see here again, mid-end multi-continental joules per centimeter cubed. But if we get to Baryon Mode, let's overhype that as well, and let's say that it is 100 times over the already, in my opinion, overhyped 6-Path Sage Mode, and say that it's coming up to 250,000 times his base. Again, probably following within some people's actual models. If you're going this route, you would be seeing as much as this many joules per centimeter cubed, or what you're looking at is about high-end moon-level joules for every cubic centimeter of volume within his attack, which is a massive amount. And these are numbers you could pull off of, again, yes, this is a hypothetical, but actually scaling from feats, not just, you know, baseless statements. And that could either one of these, I'll show both, you know, the non-overhyped in my opinion, or the overhyped, again, in my opinion. You can see them both here. Could be, if we ever see anything that shows like base Naruto, kind of like a Goku thing, right? Like Goku's always surpassing what his past powered up forms were, even in base. If we get anything that shows that like adult Naruto in base is truly anywhere calculable to his past self, like in actual forms that he took and such, that would be great. But sadly, the power disparity and such between like Kaguya and all these other people is pretty impossible to actually tell. There's still plenty of debate saying Kaguya could have easily been stronger than Ichigo and these other people. I know there's the whole statement versus statement. There's a whole bunch for both sides, believe it or not. Regardless, I'm now going to move on to Ichigo. Ichigo's a lot quicker. Ichigo essentially has, of course, many different forms, but ultimately, he kind of combines them all, and it comes down to his Shikai and his Bankai, and then his true Shikai and his true Bankai, with his Word of Salvation and all of that good stuff. But due to that, many less forms, for me to cover at least. Now, given that, adult Ichigo, what if base adult Ichigo could have put up just as much of a fight against Yubak as his teen self? If he was that powerful in base as an adult, how powerful would true Bankai Ichigo actually be? Well, we'll never get to know, but let's go through some of these numbers. Now, we know that Shikai, base Shikai, is a 5 to 10 times multiplier, based on statements, yes, but also based by feats. That we can at least, not everybody's hitting that 10 times, but at least 5 times. Shown through various different feats, and also not for everybody, but also pretty clearly for Ichigo, especially for speed. That boy definitely gets some quantifiable feats for speed that suggest at least a 5 times multiplier. Due to this being a 5 to 10 times, I will use minimums, like always, and say that it is a 5 times increase. Given that it's a 5 times increase for Shikai, and we'll use the minimum, same for Bankai, that's coming up to a 25 times increase of his base self, assuming Shikai and Bankai, and just using pure minimums. He has to be at least 25 times his base, based on, again, the feats and the scaling. And it's that 25 times increase to his base that's putting Bankai Ichigo, false Bankai Ichigo, at just rough estimations here of around this many joules per centimeter cubed, or very low end multi-continental, given what I had scaled from him previous, but not in depth enough for me to say, hey, these are the exact numbers, but within a ballpark of these numbers here, okay? And yeah, so that's getting up to his low end of multi-continental. However, it's a bit different with Ichigo. He has a bit more feats backing up to 10 times increase, so if we were to take the higher route, like I did with Naruto, instead of maybe calling it purely overhyped, and say his Bankai brings him to 100 times his base, being 10 times each, his Shikai and then Bankai, it is instead as much as this many joules per centimeter cubed, or we're talking mid-end multi-continental joules per centimeter cubed. Now, that again is just covering his false Bankai. And again, going back to just taking them at the minimums, guaranteed to be 5 times multipliers, given the feats and scaling and everything that covers those. They are definitely within the 5 times ballpark. It's very fair, however, to then say that his true versions are at least the 10 times multipliers, both. Right? That is quite starkly obvious, in my opinion, from any time I've seen when he jumped in power, and to the point where, without even like Horn of Salvation, he was vastly stronger than what he had shown previous, except for like Dangai levels of just pure power that he had shown before. Even with the Horn of Salvation, at that point, Yubak was scared of him, and he was, around those Dangai Ichigo levels of power, just at that point, let alone his true Bankai self. And that difference in power from his base to what he could, do against Yubak and such, it's quite evident, his fear and everything, that if the basic versions of his Shikai and Bankai are not going to be the 10 times, his true versions for sure are. As such, this puts true Bankai Ichigo at the same benchmark as the potentially overhyped base Bankai, aka that mid-in multi-continental joules per centimeter cube. But, what if instead his true forms were multiplicative of his base, or false Shikai and Bankai? So what I'm saying is, what if his true forms were more like 10 times his false forms? Not just his actual pure using no forms base self. Because if we did that, then we'd be looking at something of 2,500 times his actual base self, given that his false Bankai is already 25 times his base. Now his true versions would be at the minimum the 100 times of that false self. If they were to work in this regard, we get that 2,500 times base, and it'd be this line of scaling that would bring Ichigo to a whopping this many joules per centimeter cubed, or high-end multi-continental. We're talking 2 magnitudes above his false Bankai self. However, to make this clear, this number is merely taking his Bankai at, again, that 25 times base. If instead we were to say, no, his false Bankai is in fact that 100 times his base self, and his true Bankai is to be 100 times his false Bankai, we're then looking at 10,000 times his base, or something akin to this many joules per centimeter cube, or very high-end multi-continental joules per centimeter cube, almost into moon level off of just the feats and scaling there. No non-canon anything, no statements only that's never backed up. Everything here backed up for both Naruto and Ichigo. If the hypothetical was to come true somehow, some way, I know Bleach is coming back, I don't know if there's any way we could ever ascertain the direct strength that their base selves are at in their adult forms. It is a interesting thought to think about the power of the adult versions of these people we grew up watching or reading, and seeing just how far they've come, but seeing how far they could have gotten. You know, sequels often disappoint in terms of showing the power that the prequels or the original series were showing for these characters, because of course you can't just have, you know, Naruto and Boruto just absolutely demolish everybody, or there's no threats, there's nothing to look forward to in terms of, like, are they going to make it, anything like that, or at least not to the same level, right? So it's understandable, but it does kind of damper, like, showing just how powerful they've gotten. Like, you can't have Boruto face Kaguya level threats as a Genin, right? But in doing so, you're making it so that adult Naruto can't show himself to be like 100 times more powerful than he was even, you know, just as a teen in War Art. It sucks, but it is fun to think about. So that's what this was about. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll be having plenty more, and ciao.
Pastor.